Let's get on into the world of marine risk. A document released by the Alliance Global Corporate Specialty says that the number of fires on board large vessels has increased significantly in recent years. The report says that there was a record 40 cargo-related fire incidents alone in 2019, or one every 10 days. At the end of 2022, 2020, fires resulting in total losses hit a 4-year high of 10. Captain Rahul Khanna is the global head of marine risk consulting at AGCS, and he joins me now to discuss this in more details. Great to have you again on the show tonight, Captain.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Why are we seeing an increasing number of fire incidents on board large ocean-going vessels in recent times?
It's very difficult to point out one particular reason for this, but there are a few things that we have seen and we have mentioned in our annual reports previously as well. One being that the size of the vessels have grown exponentially in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. A few years ago, a 5,000 container carrying capacity ship used to be called a large ship, but now we are talking about vessels which are carrying 24,000 containers on board. And then there's this issue of misdeclaration of cargo, and sometimes dangerous goods are not declared just to save some costs, because obviously it costs a lot more. And then there's the issue of, if there's a vessel so huge, the number of crew on board have also declined over the years. So while the size is becoming bigger, the number of people on board running the operations are less. So if there is a small fire, it becomes very difficult for the crew to actually fight the fire, because firstly, the number of people is less. Secondly, the equipment is lacking, and there are unintended consequences of this rapid expansion of the ship size. There are other features as well. We've seen fires on board the car carriers. There was a recent fire on the vessel called Felicity Ace, where luxury cars have been on fire, and so finally vessel sank. Now, in those cases, there are other issues like the design of the vessel contributes to certain cases. There are these new cars, which are electric cars carrying lithium-ion batteries, and there have been cases of fires involving these new batteries. And carrying cars at sea is a whole different ballgame. And hence, I think over the years, the risk management of fire risk with the size of the vessel hasn't kept pace. And we need to, as an industry, start to think a lot more on how we can manage this risk, because this is going not just in numbers. The cost of each of these incidents has also spiraled exponentially.
But rarely do we have incidents, or do we have incidents of fire on vessels that transport crude oil and gas as other highly inflammable products?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's inherent. That's a very interesting point you raised, because we have known for these sort of vessels, like carrying crude oil, petroleum products, and gas. We've known that there's a very high risk of fire in these, and that's why the mindset is very different. These vessels operate at a very high levels of safety, and the standards, unfortunately, when it compares to other vessels, they aren't that great. But these vessels, because we knew right from the beginning that we are carrying a cargo which is highly inflammable, and it could be disastrous if we had a fire incident on those, the standards have been really high for many, many years. That's why we don't see incidents of fire or major incidents on these vessels. They are, in comparison with regular cargo vessels, they're very low.
Captain Khanna, what measures could carriers implement to reduce the risk of fire on large vessels? I'm sure this runs into hundreds of millions of dollars in losses each time these fire incidents happen.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the cost can be easily hundreds of millions of dollars in these vessels. Incidences because of the value of the cargo, because of the wreck removal which you'll have to do, or salvage operations that are required. And in many cases, we have seen these costs go upwards of $500 million easily. I think a few years ago, we did a disaster, the worst case scenario analysis, and we estimated that one of these incidents, if it is in the wrong place at the wrong time, could actually cost the industry upwards of $2 billion. So this is a serious issue. And there's a lot of work that has been going on in the industry in the last few years regarding container ship fires. Now, particularly on containers, there's been the issue of misdeclaration, as I mentioned earlier. But we need to look at the design of these vessels. Have these vessel sizes grown too big for their own good in respect to the fire containment? Imagine trying to look for a fire source in 20,000 containers stacked up on top of each other. It becomes a very difficult task. So, do we need to look at the fire detection and fire prevention measures in a different way? And these are the discussions that are happening at the regulatory body at the IMO level. And I think last year, the IUMI, which is the insurers organization, presented a paper as part of the working group, which I was a part, and we presented a set of recommendations for these vessels to be taken upon, so that the fire detection is improved and we can detect fires at a much earlier time and very quickly, and pinpoint the location so that the crew on board can fight the fire in a relatively faster manner and contain it. Because once it goes out of hand, it becomes a disastrous scenario. And the other thing is to look at providing more equipment for the crew to fight these fires on board. And the third thing is looking at training, additional training for the crew members if that is needed. So there's a whole rethink that we need to do as an industry, because these fires are not only growing in numbers, but the cost is just going through the roof.
What new thinking, to sum it up, Captain, what new thinking should marine cargo business sector take on board in terms of risk mitigation? You've mentioned a few of them, but you're a captain yourself. I'm sure you've had a few experience around this. Tell me about that. Let's sum it up.
Yeah, I think personal experiences obviously count, but the new generation of seafarers that are coming on board, I think we need to very holistically look at this problem and start from things like crew training, start from the design of the vessels. We need to start to think about how we build these mitigation measures on the vessels, on these types of ships, right on paper before they even get built in the shipyard. So the responsibility is lying across all stakeholders in the maritime industry, right from ship owners to shipbuilders to insurers to classification society to the crew members themselves, ports and terminals. And there has to be a generic rise in awareness levels that there is this threat of fire on these cargo vessels, where cargo traditionally we never thought that this is going to be they are not flammable, or this problem is relatively low as compared to the problems on crude oil tankers, as we said earlier. So overall, there has to be a rise in awareness level on risk mitigation measures, right from the building stage to the final operating stage.
Your insights into the world of marine risk management is well appreciated. Do have a pleasant evening, Captain Rahul Khanna of the Global Alliance Global Corporate Strategy. We'll touch base with you next time.